All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Sean here at Zyxel. Today, we're doing our new partner introduction. So today's presentation is sort of a high-level overview of all the products we have. We won't be getting too in-depth on any particular product, and it's not completely comprehensive. We've got, somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 different SKUs, and obviously it's just too much to go through. But we've put this together today just to sort of provide you that high-level overview of some of our more popular product lines, maybe hit a few of the feature applications and areas to focus on for those products, and just sort of give you an idea of what we have. If there's something you see today that you'd like to know more about, good chance we've got another dedicated webinar on that product line. If not, reach out to your salesperson, Jacob, Andy, or David, and let them know what you'd like to learn a little bit more about, and they can point you in the right direction, or maybe put together something specifically for you and your team on that topic. As we go through today, send in questions using the question and answer interface in Zoom. Don't raise your hand. Don't send it through chat, send it through question and answer, because that's what I can see as I'm going through today's presentation. Depending on the question, I'll answer it as we go through. Some questions I may save till the end, just depending on how in-depth I need to go. So we'll start here with a little background on who Zyxel is. So just a little background on us. I know we are not a household name. We are not Cisco. We are not HP. So a lot of times when you're talking to somebody and you're proposing Zyxel equipment, it's perfectly normal for them to say who, or how do you pronounce that? So a little quick background on us. We've been making computer networking equipment for over 30 years. We were founded all the way back in 1989. We are a Taiwanese company. So that's where our headquarters is. It's in Taiwan. And then our US office has been in the same little corner of basically Anaheim since 1989. So our US office is here in Anaheim. That's our warehouse. It's our main warehouse here. It is our tech support. So if you call in for tech support, you will be talking to a Zyxel employee here out of Anaheim. In fact, if you hear voices in the background as I'm doing today's presentation, that is our tech support team, because I'm doing this today from my desk instead of the conference room like I normally do. So a little extra noise in here today. That's also where our sales team, for the most part, is based out of. So, and our marketing team. So we're based here out of Anaheim. Now, for those of you on the East Coast who call in extra early in the morning, you may get rerouted to our German team. So again, tech support, it's not outsourced. It's not going through a third party. It is here. You will always be talking to a Zyxel employee. We are a global company. We deal in 150 different global markets, and we've deployed a little over 100 million devices out there in the field. So while we aren't somebody you maybe know, we have been doing this for a long time and have quite a bit of expertise. Part of the reason why people don't know us is because a lot of our business is done through the ISP space, and a lot of that equipment is rebranded with the ISP's brand name on it, or it's something that's sitting in the central office somewhere where no one's going to see it unless you work for that telco. I did see we got a few extra people who have joined us in the last minute or two. So for everyone who's just joined us, we're just getting started. If you have questions as we go through today, use the question and answer interface. So the reason you are here today is you are probably a new partner, or maybe you're an old partner that just wants a little refresh on our product lineup as it's changed over time here. So as a partner, you do get access to some benefits that aren't available to non-partners. So one of the main ones here is going to be partner discounts. As a partner, you do get automatic discounts when you purchase through distribution. And that discount depends on your dollar amount of business you've done. We do that in 6-month increments. So you either get one of 3 different discount levels based on how much you've sold in the previous 6 months. We have the ability to do deal registration. So deal registration makes sure that only you get special pricing on deal. Once you've registered it, if you're the first one, that is your project. So that gets you some extra discount, often above and beyond the standard partner discounts. You get access to today's webinars, things like this. You get access to our sales engineer. You get access to our tech support team, priority access, so you don't have to wait in as long of a queue if you would if you were just an end user calling in, and other tools here that we have for you. Now, the US here, we have broken up the country into 3 different regions. So Andy is a salesperson for you, those of you on the west side of the country. On the east side of the country, you are dealing with David Chen. And those of you in the middle of the country, you have Jacob as your salesperson. So that should be someone that you should be using. Don't be afraid to use your salesperson. They can help you when you're having problems with distribution. Maybe distribution saying a certain product isn't available or they don't have it. The sales team can help push some of that stuff through and work on the back end to get things moving for you. They can also help you if you're having issues with tech support or having issues. Maybe you're dealing and quoting on a new project in a different area than you're used to. The sales guys can help you spec out the hardware you need for that and put you in touch with our sales engineer if necessary to help further spec that out. So today we are going to be primarily concentrating on what we here call channel products. So these are products that are primarily used by small businesses, small and medium businesses, network deployment solutions. So we're going to be talking about security appliances, wireless, our LAN switching products, network management solutions. We will not be talking about our consumer products. Such as our consumer routers or power line products, things like that. We'll leave that out of today's presentation. So we're going to start by talking about one of our network management platforms, and that is Nebula. So Nebula is our cloud managed network solution. This is something that we launched all the way back in 2016. We were the first guys out there offering a cloud management platform that was aimed at the SMB space. That was full stack, meaning it could manage multiple types of devices. Back then, most of the only cloud solutions that were out there were either specifically just for access points, or if you were looking for a full stack, you were stuck with Cisco, which is aimed and priced more at the enterprise space. So this is our free platform. So to use Nebula, it doesn't require anything other than that you have some Nebula compatible hardware that you want to manage in the cloud. The idea behind Nebula is to simplify things and make things take less time and less effort on your part, especially at deploying new networks. So thanks to our wizards and some of our other tools, you can have a basic network up and running in just a couple minutes, and that includes creating your Nebula cloud account. Nebula allows you to start configuring your devices. Honestly, before you've even bought them, a lot of your network settings, you can go in right now, even if you've never bought a Zyxel piece of equipment, go to nebula.zyxel.com, log in, start creating your customers, start creating some sites, and start configuring some basics for you. Once you've gotten the hardware in hand at your location, you simply need to scan the QR code on the outside of the boxes and assign it to your customer and site, and then ship the hardware off to where it needs to be installed. Local installation is basically just the hardware itself, plugging it in, making sure it has power and an internet connection. Once you turn it on and it gets an internet connection, it will automatically reach out to the cloud, find out where it's registered at, download its configuration, update its firmware, and you're good to go. There's no local on-site configuration required. Unless you absolutely have to have fixed IP at the initial deployment, in which case you do need to log in and set the IP address, but you don't need to tell the devices they're being managed in the cloud. You don't need to point them to a server somewhere. It's all handled. And the reason it's all handled easily like that is because the agent that communicates with the cloud is built into our Nebula compatible hardware. So that means there's no virtual machines that need to set up. There's no local configuration you need to do. There's no cloud keys. There's no CNAs. There's none of that. Just plug it in and you're good and set. No additional software you need. And from that point, you can access your customers and their networks wherever you happen to be, as long as you have an internet connection and a web browser. All configuration is done in the cloud. Firmware updates, things like that, all done in the cloud for you. So again, no need to go on site. Just simply make your changes in the cloud, wait a couple minutes, and they will be automatically pushed out to your customer site. So Nebula itself was designed from the ground up with the idea that you have a lot of customers and those customers may have multiple networks. So the interface and how we've configured everything is done based on that. It's really easy to manage multiple customers, multiple sites for each of those customers really easily in the Nebula interface. And the core version of Nebula here, and the version that most of our customers are using, is absolutely free. There is no limitation on the number of devices or customers that you can manage with a free version of Nebula. We do sell some licenses that unlock some additional cloud-based features, especially that might be of interest for those of you that are a true MSP. Um, and I think we've talked about that just briefly on today's presentation. Now we do a much more, every month we do a much more in-depth dive on Nebula and the licensing and things like that. So if you'd like to learn more about Nebula, you can always log into the Nebula cloud and start playing around with it, even if you don't have hardware. But join us for those other webinars if you'd like to learn a little bit more. So when you're looking at our Nebula equipment, you will see products labeled either Nebula Flex or Nebula Flex Pro. So all Nebula Flex means is that the device can be managed in the Nebula cloud. Um, we used to originally do it sort of the Cisco way, where if you wanted to do traditional management, you bought Cisco equipment. If you wanted to buy cloud managed equipment, you bought Meraki. We have gotten away from that, and now we've just decided, hey, we'll make most of our equipment such that it's your choice if you want to use it and manage it the traditional way, or if you want to manage it using our cloud solution. So that's what Nebula Flex means. It means that device can be used or managed in the cloud, or you can manage it the traditional way. And it's really easy to do. If you want to manage it in the cloud, you simply scan that QR code and assign it to one of your customers, and the device will automatically reboot into cloud mode after a few minutes. And if at some point you decide to move it to another site and decide you don't want to use cloud at that site for whatever reason, you simply remove it from the cloud and it will automatically put itself back into standard management mode. And we do have products that are labeled Nebula Flex Pro. All that means is it comes bundled with our optional professional pack license. So you get a 1-year license bundled with the hardware when you buy it, should you want to use it. So that's the difference between Nebula Flex and Nebula Flex Pro. The only wrinkle on that is when it comes to our access points. So our access points can be managed traditional standalone. It can be managed through the Nebula cloud, but of course we can also use a local controller. So if you want to manage an AP with a local controller and not the cloud, you still need to buy a Nebula Flex Pro device because only Nebula Flex Pro devices can be managed with a local controller. So that's it for Wi-Fi for now. We'll go ahead and jump over here to our security products. So this is probably our most popular product line that we have. It's also one of our more complex lines, and it's the one I know the least about. So we'll go through it today. Hopefully you won't have too many questions. Or if you do, they're ones that I can answer. So our security firewall products, we use a third-party company called ICSA to verify and test our firewall products to make sure they are doing what they claim to do. So we have been certified by them now continuously for over 20 years on our firewall products. Now, most of our firewall products are going to be UTM products. So that means in addition to your typical firewall router functions, you also have the ability to do gateway-based content filtering, anti-spam, antivirus, intrusion detection, etc. And the way that normally works with most of our competitors is most of our competitors do that on their own. They create make the hardware, they make the software. They also try to be a security company making the signatures to provide those extra services. So instead of trying to do that all in-house, what we have done is we have partnered with some of the biggest names in the industry to provide those signatures or those services for us. So that means when you're using our UTM equipment, it's us providing the hardware and software, and it's these guys providing the extra security levels that are on there. So we've partnered with guys like McAfee, WebRoot, Lastline, Tread Micro, and Bitdefender to provide those additional gateway-based security services. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of the features here that most of our security products have for you. So we have the ability to do link aggregation groups where you basically combine multiple ports together, either for increased availability or reliability of those connections or for just increased capacity. We offer high availability pro, so you can have multiple firewall gateways, and if one of them fails, the other one automatically takes over. We have the ability to do SSL packet inspection, so we can still use those UTM services and apply them to encrypted traffic using SSL. So you can't use SSL to get around content filtering or downloading malware, things like that. We support both Radius and Active Directory integration, so you can create user-based policies and rules. We offer VPN high availability. So again, you can have multiple VPN connections between one site and another. So if one of them fails for some reason, the other is automatically able to take over. The ability to do WAN load balancing, support for multiple WAN ports, whether you're using that for failover or load balancing. Lightweight SSL-based VPN client software, making it really easy to deploy VPN connections to your remote users. L2TP over IPsec for your mobile devices. An easy VPN button that's made to reduce a lot of the configuration that traditionally goes into setting up a VPN connection. And then on the UTM side of things, we offer gateway-based antivirus, category-based content filtering, Layer 7 application intelligence. This allows us to create those policy rules based on individual applications and in some cases the features of those applications. So instead of needing to know ports and protocols and things like that, you can simply go in there and say, hey, I want to block Facebook Messenger. Done. Or I want to create a QoS rule for Facebook Messenger video chat, things like that. A geo enforcer, blocking out traffic from different geographic locations based on the source IP address. Our ATP series and now the USG Flex series offers the ability to do sandboxing and machine learning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, intrusion detection and prevention, etc. In addition to all of those, we have some extra features that our security gateways provide. Our security gateways are also our wireless LAN controllers. If you want to do wireless LAN deployments and you want them to be managed with a local controller, our security gateways can do that. Almost all of them can manage a small number of APs out of the box, and then you can use an optional license to unlock additional AP management functionality. We also have hotspot functionality. So if you're looking to provide captive portal guest access at a hotel or a coffee shop or public hotspot, we have the ability to do that as well with most of our security gateways. Another thing we have the ability to do here is to create a virtual private cloud. So basically, our security appliances are certified with both Amazon and Microsoft to be able to create a direct VPN connection to their cloud. So that way you can have hosted cloud applications on Amazon or Microsoft services, and they'll be able to be accessed as if they are locally run servers or software solutions on your local network, with the gateway creating the VPN connection directly to the cloud for easy access. So when we look at our product lines, we've got 3 different security firewall product lines at the moment. We have the VPN series, the ATP series, and then in the middle here, we have the USG Flex. Now, one of the things that's currently going on as we are in the process of eliminating the VPN series and the ATP series, and basically porting all of that functionality into the USG Flex series. So right now we've already phased out a number of our VPN security appliances, and we've got a couple more here that we still have that will eventually go away. The ATP series is probably here till the end of the year, and then we'll start phasing those out. But as it stands right now, the idea behind these 3 different series was the VPN series, as the name implies, was for a simple firewall gateway that gave you some optional content filtering functionality, but was primarily focused on those of you that just needed a basic firewall or those of you that needed VPN. You needed a lot of VPN tunnels for whatever reason. It was the VPN series. Our USG Flex series was our UTM series. So those were our firewall appliances that support the full UTM stack, antivirus, content filtering, IDP, etc. And then the ATP series was the next generation or advanced threat protection firewalls. And that was providing standard UTM, but also providing sandboxing and machine learning to be able to help catch and block like zero-day exploits and things like that. So those all 3 still are here, but it'll eventually all be USG Flex, and then you'll be able to use licenses to upgrade to ATP functionality to add some of the extra VPN functionality. So we'll talk briefly here about sandboxing that was introduced with the ATP series. So your conventional UTM functionality. And again, UTM is a firewall hosted antivirus, IDP, et cetera, for your network. And the way it works is, as we mentioned before, you get signatures, which come from either you make them yourselves, or in the case of Zyxel, we partner with those third parties to to keep on top of antivirus threats, content filtering, ADP, IDP, things like that. And basically, they create these signatures, and then when traffic comes to your firewall gateway, you use those signatures to see, hey, is that something I should block, or is that something I should allow? Now, the problem that we run into on the network is that the internet isn't always evolving and changing place. So you're always going to be getting new behaviors and new types of threats that evolve over on the network, out on the internet. And there's a delay between when a new threat gets launched on the internet to when those third parties can identify that threat, create the signatures, and push those signatures out. So ATP is designed to sort of solve that and get you basically the ability to recognize traffic almost as soon as a new type of traffic comes out, whether it's a malicious type of traffic or not. So the way it works here is through something we call sandboxing, and then we use cloud intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever your favorite term for that is these days. It seems to change over time here, which term is the most popular, but it's all basically the same thing. So what happens is we get some sort of new traffic that the firewall hasn't seen before. So it doesn't know if it's good or bad. It could be malicious. It could just be some sort of new application or new behavior that's out there for perfectly valid and legitimate traffic. So what we have the ability to do here on our firewalls is we have the ability to sort of contain that traffic, those packets, sandbox them and upload them into the cloud. The cloud then has the ability using artificial intelligence to figure out what that traffic is and that whether or not it poses a threat. So it does it pretty quickly. And once it's seen that, it's then able to update the signatures for all other devices and let them know, hey, this is good, let it through, or this is bad, don't let that through. And so the way it works is basically every Zyxel ATP device is part of has access to this cloud. So as soon as a new traffic hits one of our ATPs, they're able to sandbox it, classify it, and then all the other ATPs that are out there will be able to know what to do with that traffic once it approaches them. Because new threats and new types of traffic, don't hit the entire web all at once. They generally start in one geographic location and then proceed out from there. So that cloud-based sandboxing and artificial intelligence, that is powered by Last Line. So that's who provides that for us. They're one of the bigger names in this type of space. One other security product we have, it's one that we just launched in May, and the supply is trickling out to you, everyone now. That is our SCR50AXE. So what this is a lightweight firewall gateway that's designed for small offices and small businesses. It provides UTM-like services without requiring the UTM license, and it does this using IP-based network protection for you. The nice thing about this little box is this is a Nebula managed box. So for those of you that have been selling Zyxel already, one of the most common requests we've gotten is, hey, we want to use CPE devices, small gateways, routers for homes or some of our clients, and we want to manage them in the Nebula cloud. Now you can do that with the SCR. Before that, you had to go up to like a USG 50 or VPN 50, and that was generally too expensive and overkill. So this might be a solution for those of you looking for more of a CPE type box, as well as those of you looking for a security appliance that's more similar to like a Netgear or Ubiquiti security gateway. So to help you when it comes to security devices, we have a cloud-based reporting solution called SecuReporter that basically works with our firewall gateways to create a centralized cloud-hosted instance for you to go to, so you can create and generate reports as to what's going on your customers' firewalls. So it's a great tool, whether you're providing, proactive security to your customers, or just to have something there. So when you come to your customer at the end of the year, their UTM services are expiring and you'd like them to renew, you can show them, look at all these things that Zyxel firewall gateway has stopped from your networks. We're able to generate these reports that show, what kind of threats have been blocked, where on your network that threat was targeted to, when it happened, who the attacker was. So it's a great tool there. It can break down threats by individual users on your network. Do you have a certain user that keeps going to websites they shouldn't, or keeps trying to download files they shouldn't? We have make that easy for you to figure out who they are. And just like the Nebula Cloud, it's been designed from the ground up with the idea of knowing that you're going to have multiple customers that you need to provide these reports for. You're going to need individual reports for each customer. So we do that for you. You simply log into the cloud and it's all there for you. You can set up these reports to automatically be emailed to you, or you can have them sent to your customer so they can always see what's going on the network and what you've protected them from. And you have the ability to brand those emails with your branding on them. So that's it for security overview. I'm now going to move on to our switches, which is where we've got the highest number of SKUs. And it is a little bit confusing sometimes trying to figure out, hey, I need a 24 port switch. Which of the 2,000 different 24 port switches that you offer do I need? So I'm going to start with talking about how our naming works. So by understanding our naming rules, it will make it easier for you when you're looking at a price list or going to distribution and searching Zyxel switches to sort of figure out what sort of features those switches offer. So to begin with, all of our switches will start with a 2 or 3 letter prefix. So an ES switch, of which we really don't have any anymore, that means that switch offers 100 megabit ports across all of the ports. If it starts with GS, which most of them do these days, that means all of the ports on that switch are 1 gig ports. If you see XS, that is telling you that all of the ports on that switch are 10 gig ports. If you see XGS, that's telling you that most ports are 1 gig, but there are multi-gig uplink ports, usually 10 gig, sometimes 2.5 or 5. There's an MGS series. We don't offer those here in North America, but those are our metro switches. Those are generally switches aimed at the ISP space. But if you're Googling around, you may come across those. So I wanted to include that there for you. And then most of our switches will have a letter suffix on the end of the model number. So if it says P, that's telling you it's 802.3 AT-PoE. If you see HP, it's telling you it's high-powered PoE. So that's either PoE plus or PoE plus plus, depending on the model. And then if you see the letter F, that's telling you that all the ports on that switch are fiber ports. There are no copper ports on that switch. So this is just showing you here. Here's our traditional ports here. Our main ports are here, and then our uplink ports are over on the right-hand side here. We have these SFP ports, so for fiber, so you can add the SFP or SFP plus module you need for your network. One of the things we do run into here, which causes a little bit of confusion, on some of our switches, we have these sort of dual identity ports, where you will have one port with 2 physical interfaces. So oftentimes what you will see is a SFP port and a copper port right next to each other. There's an example right here. Up here is a copper, up here is an SFP, and below it is a copper port. So that's one port as far as the switch is concerned. And then it gives you the flexibility of either doing a copper uplink or a fiber uplink for that port. Most of our switches support a software-based stacking, but we do have some switches that do provide a dedicated hardware stacking. And those use dedicated short cables called DAC cables to link the switches together for dedicated stacking. So on the PoE side of things, I've sort of already touched on that. Standard PoE is 15.4 watts. PoE Plus, or 802.3 AT, that is your 30 watt. And then 802.3 BT is your PoE Plus Plus, which is 60 watts of power per port. So between the prefix and the suffix, we'll have a bunch of numbers. So those numbers kind of tell you which product family that switch falls into. So our 100, 1000, 1100, and 1300 series. So if you see the first number is, 100, like a 108, or a 1000 series, like a 1008, or 1100, like an 1116, or 1100-16. Those are telling you that's what series they're part of. So those are all going to be unmanaged switches. The 100 series are the desktop switches. The 1000 and 1100 are your rack mount unmanaged ones, or mostly rack mount. And then 1300 are security switches that are unmanaged. Step up from that gives you some basic features. So we have the 1200 series and the 1900 series. So those are managed using a web GUI. And as the number gets bigger, basically the more features the switch has. So a 1900 series switch has got more features than the 1200 series switch. And then going up from there, we've got the 1350, 1920, and 1930 series switches. So the 1920 and 1930 are kind of our layer 2 web managed switches. And the 1350 is our security web managed switch. And then we've got our 2000 series, 3000, and 4000 series switches. So those are generally our layer 3 light or layer 3 switches. They provide a web managed interface, and those ones will provide a full CLI. So those of you that are old school, like to use CLI or doing your own scripting, those are the models that you want to be looking at. When it comes to or cloud management, you're looking at the 1915, 1920, 1930, and 1350 series. And then our 2220, 3800 series are the Nebula Flex Pro switches. So we'll briefly touch on some of the different models here. So this is like looking at our 1200 series. So you can see here, these are desktop-based switches. Like again, they've got a very basic web GUI with some basic VLAN functionality. So anywhere from 5-port, 8-port, PoE, non-PoE, and some XGS series. So again, XGS is telling you that these models are 1 gig on the main ports, but they offer multi-gig uplink ports here. In this case, you've got some 2.5 gig copper, and you've got some 10 gig SFP ports on it. Jumping up there from the 1900 series gets you what I would consider like a layer 2 light switch. A lot more features than the 1200 series, but still not quite up there with the 1930s. And these are mostly going to be rack mounted switches up to 48 ports, various different levels of PoE budget. The 1920 is our true sort of layer 2 switch without a CLI. And then the 1930 series, those are almost all going to be XGS or XS series. So those are going to be the ones, if you need 10 gig uplink ports, those are the models you're going to be looking at there for them. And then our most popular series here, the 2200 series, it's available in both a GS and an XGS version. And these are probably our second most popular switch line. These are our true layer 2 plus switches with command line interface. So on the PoE side of things, one of the cool features we have here for you is intelligent PoE management. We used to call it consumption mode. So depending on what slide you're looking at, we'll call it consumption mode, intelligent PoE. And basically the way it works is traditional PoE management. If you just follow the way the industry spec is for 802.3 AF or AT or BT, basically a device negotiates with the switch and identifies a class. And based on what class the device is, that will cause the switch to allocate out of the PoE budget that amount of protection for you. So for instance, a class 3 device will have the switch require 15.4 watts. If we jump over to a class 4 device, in this example here, it's 30 watts. So you can see that's a pretty massive jump between classes. There's not enough classes to really narrow down how much power your device needs. So because of that, with traditional PoE management, you end up wasting a lot of your available budget because it's being reserved based on the class. So our consumption mode or intelligent mode basically frees up, monitors the device, sees how much power it's actually drawing, and then can free up additional budget for other devices instead of reserving them the way they're supposed to. So in this example here on this slide, we've got 24 IP phones. These are a class 3 device, so they'll reserve 15.4 watts, but they only actually need 9 watts of power. So if you were to use the industry standard way of doing things, that means you need a switch that can provide 370 watts of PoE power. However, with consumption mode, you only need a switch that provides 216 watts of available PoE power to power the same number of devices. So a huge difference in the PoE capability of the switch that you need. So you can buy a lower end switch as far as PoE budget goes, and save yourself some money. And then a similar example here, using in this case a pan tilt zoom IP camera. It is a class 4 device, so it would require a switch allocate 30 watts of power per device, when in reality it only needs 16 watts of power to boot up and function. So we're talking a difference of 600 watts of power on your coming out of your switch to power 20 of these versus 320 watts of PoE budget when you're using our consumption mode. We also have this 1350 series of switches. So I want to sort of break them out and talk about them separate from the rest of our switches. So these were switches that we launched a couple years ago that were specifically built for those of you that are providing IP surveillance. So those of you that are doing IP camera installations. So we've added some features to these that were in demand from the security partners that we were talking to at the time. But some of these features might also be helpful for those of you that aren't doing IP cameras. So there are some benefits. So we'll go through these here really quickly for you. So one of the cool features it has is it can provide data and PoE power up to 250 meters instead of 100 meters, which is the industry standard. Now, the way it does this, though, is it reduces the data rate. So you put it in this mode, and it will max out your data rate at 10 megabits per second. But for a lot of applications, 10 megabits per second is going to be enough for you to get that extended range. These switches provide continuous PoE power. So if you need to reboot the device for whatever reason, like a firmware update, it will not power cycle those connected PoE devices. They will lose their data connection while the device reboots, but the connected devices will not reboot because their power maintains during the reboot process. We also have a camera status screen, which will show you the connected devices, the IP address of the connected devices, make it really easy for you to go into the switch interface and reboot those devices by cycling PoE for them. We also have an auto camera recovery mode. And again, it doesn't always have to be used with a camera. It can be used for another device. So for cameras, we use LLDP, but for other devices, we can use ping. And basically you set up and configure here how often to ping the connected device. And if it stops responding, we will automatically reboot it for you. So you can define how many drop pings before we reboot the device. And then we can also set up in there, how long to wait after you've power cycled the device before you resume, right? Because some devices may boot up in 30 seconds. Some devices may take a minute or two. So you don't want it constantly rebooting it. So we've got all of those settings there for you to prevent that from happening. So it's a nice little tool there. If, you've got some flaky connected equipment that tends to, lock up from time to time, you can use this feature here to automatically reboot those devices for you. And these switches are also a little bit heavier duty than some of our other switches. So that's it for our switching. Again, if you have any questions as we go through, use that question and answer part of the Zoom interface to send them in. So next up for you, we're going to talk about our wireless access points. I'm not really going to talk about our sort of low-end prosumer APs. We'll start with our true sort of dedicated business class access points. So that's our 100 and 1100 series access points and up. So we sort of break them into two groups here. This is going to be our Nebula Flex series and our Nebula Flex Pro. So again, Nebula Flex Pro on APs also unlocks the ability to manage the APs through a local controller. So when you're looking at our access points, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about a $500 AP or a $89 AP, this is our design philosophy, and it's why we can offer lifetime warranties on a lot of our really cheap access points where most of our competition does not. So the design philosophy is basically to build our APs so that they're going to last. We used to at our trade shows, and I think we're going to start doing this again. We used to bring some of our APs, and we would have some of our competitors' APs, Ruckus, Ubiquiti, etc. And we would just have you hold both of them. We would have you hold equivalent APs from each vendor, and you would notice that our APs weigh a lot more. So why is that? So when we're dealing with solid state technology like this, one of the main leading causes of failure over time is heat fatigue. Basically, heat builds up. It can cause solder joints to crack. It can cause the little micro switches inside your chips to start failing. So we've designed our housings to try to reduce that problem. And we do that by adding a large metal, what's essentially a heat sink behind the main PCBA. So this draws heat off of the board and off of the components and then vents them through a bunch of holes through the back. So most of our competition does not do this. In fact, some of our competition doesn't even have vent holes to let the heat out, which is why their warranty is a lot less. Another thing we do here is another cause of failure on solid state components is capacitor failure. So because of that, we do not use electrolytic capacitors in our hardware. We only use solid state capacitors to reduce the risk of those failing on you. Another thing you will notice on most of our APs is there's a lot more shielding going on our board than you will see with our competition. Some of this is being done for EMI issues to give us just a little bit better EMI shielding. But a big part of this is because we have 5G and 4G filtering. So not an issue in your typical small office, but if you're in a larger building where you are using a DAS system to distribute cellular coverage inside the building, it can cause problems with your Wi-Fi. Some of those channels being used by your cellular providers border on your 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, and they can easily bleed over and cause interference if the APs are too close to one of those DAS distribution devices. So we have this extra shielding to help block that and prevent that. Another thing you will see we do differently is we do not put our antennas directly onto the same PCBA as the rest of our chips. They are on their own separate board, and there is usually a shield between the main board and that antenna board. So that provides you just that much better protection from interference, gives you that much better signal to noise ratio. So for a good strong connection, it doesn't make much difference, but for those edge cases, those users that are, at the edge of the Wi-Fi coverage area, it can make a huge difference in the quality of connection for them. Our APs also have some unique technology that you may not have run into if you haven't sold our equipment before. So one of them is we offer what's called dual optimized antennas. So your traditional access point has one set of antennas in it. Those antennas are optimized based on the idea that you're going to be mounting your access point on a ceiling directly over the area you want to cover, roughly centrally located in that area. The problem we run into is out in the real world that sometimes you cannot mount those access points on the ceiling for whatever reason. And you end up having to mount them rotated 90 degrees on the wall. So when you do that, you get a less than ideal coverage pattern because your pattern is shooting the beams out to either side, assuming you're covering the area directly under it. So you end up putting a lot of the signal up into the ceiling or floor where it's either lost or can cause interference with devices on those other floors. So dual optimized antenna access points have two sets of antennas, one for your traditional ceiling mount and one that's optimized for wall mount. And it lets you switch between the two based on where you've installed that particular access point. The other feature we have, which is going to be something that you may be familiar with if you sell Ruckus equipment, is smart antenna technology. So again, your traditional AP has one antenna pattern designed to be mounted directly above the area to be covered. Now, one of the issues we run into is we run into what's called co-channel interference. And basically, the way Wi-Fi works, I'm oversimplifying this a bit with the new MU-MIMO technologies, but in general, devices take turns broadcasting. The access point broadcasts, then one of your clients broadcasts, then a different client broadcasts, et cetera. And they all sort of fight with each other over whose turn it is to broadcast. So if two or more devices decide to broadcast at the same time on the same channel, or you've got some additional equipment that happens to produce radiation on the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz band, that can cause what we call code channel interference and degrade the quality of your wireless connection. So our smart antenna technology helps solve that. So Ruckus calls theirs BeamFlex or BeamFlex Plus. It's a similar technology here. And ours basically works, instead of having that one antenna pattern, which is your traditional AP, or two different antenna patterns with our dual optimized, our smart antenna APs have literally hundreds of antenna patterns that they can use. So they can go through and automatically choose the best antenna pattern to use based on the relationship of where the client device is in relation to the access point. So they can sort of focus the beam towards them, but we can also choose antenna patterns using our algorithm that also looks for other sources of interference, whether that's other access points or whether that's microwaves or whatever it happens to be, and choose an antenna pattern that allows us to ignore those sources of interference. It makes a dramatic difference when it comes to messy real world environments where you've either got a lot of users or you've got a lot of other wireless devices or a lot of access points in the same general area. So it's good for schools, hotels, conference centers, things like that. This is just doing a quick comparison here. This is comparing our WAX 650S to an HP Aruba AP515. Both of these have roughly the same spec on the 5 gigahertz radio. They're both 4x4 spatial streams, 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6. So you can see in our test environment, our speeds are green, their speeds are blue, and a big difference in performance between both the receive speeds and the transmit speeds. Now, a number of years back, a third party at the University of Brescia in Italy, their networking department saw the claims that guys like us and Ruckus made about smart antenna, and they decided to test that out. So I've got a link there on the bottom of the page you can go to find their entire white paper and the entire study that they did. You can also just Google, I think, Zyxel smart antenna, and it'll just pull up a link where we've got a white paper as well as a link to the actual full thing. But the short version is what they found is they compared us, Ruckus, Cisco, and HP Aruba, and they found that smart antenna products performed up to 70% better than non-smart antenna products in a real-world environment where there are sources of interference. In a clean room, not much difference, but in an unclean room, in a traditional, real-world environment, huge difference. Over 56% better performance than Cisco versus our equipment. And we even did better than Ruckus in those high interference environments. So I do want to talk briefly here about Wi-Fi 6. We have a number of Wi-Fi 6 access points out there. Wi-Fi 6 was designed, it's really the first major change to the way Wi-Fi works since 802.11 was launched all the way back in 1999. It's designed to solve a lot of the issues that have plagued Wi-Fi up until now. So some of the key things here is, in theory, Wi-Fi 6 supports speeds nearly up to 10 gigabits per second. It's been designed to use in environments where you've got a lot of other wireless devices, whether those are clients or other access points. And the really nice thing about Wi-Fi 6 is that Wi-Fi 6 upgrades your 2.4 and your 5 gigahertz radio. A lot of people don't realize that with 11AC, the improvements to Wi-Fi were only on the 5 gigahertz radio. The 2.4 radio still continued to be essentially an 11N radio. So now with Wi-Fi 6, you can upgrade both radios to the new Wi-Fi 6 performance. Now, one thing I do want to talk about here when you are searching around for Wi-Fi 6 APs is some vendors, in order to save price, are calling their product a Wi-Fi 6 AP, but they're still using 11N technology on the 2.4 radio. They've only upgraded the 5 gigahertz radio, even though in theory, Wi-Fi 6 should be on both of those radios. So just to let you know, when it comes to Zyxel, all of our access points, cheap ones, expensive ones, all of them, if we're calling them Wi-Fi 6, we have Wi-Fi 6 technology on both the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz radio. We don't do that where some of our models are only Wi-Fi 6 on one radio. So some of the ways it's getting to the faster speed is we've increased the number of spatial streams that are supported with the MU-MIMO. We also, with Wi-Fi 6, now have the ability to do MU-MIMO from APs to the access point. So with 11AC, where MU-MIMO was first introduced, the AP could send data to multiple clients at the same time, but the clients still had to take turns broadcasting. So with Wi-Fi 6 and compatible client devices, multiple client devices can now broadcast back to the AP without interfering with each other. We have OFDMA, so it provides a much better divvying up of the airtime, the ability to do resource unit scheduling to keep different client devices from stepping on each other, higher modulation, the ability for smart home devices to basically tell them when they should wake up. So they're not constantly having to wake up and check if they need to receive anything, et cetera. So we've talked about Nebula. So again, one of the alternatives to using our Nebula Cloud for AP management is the ability to use an on-premise controller. And basically the feature sets between cloud and a local controller are very, very similar. It's all of the same basic core functionality, including the zero AP configuration. If you turn on and deploy one of our local area controllers, the APs will automatically find it. You don't need to go in and tell the AP to connect to the controller. The one area where you get a major amount of difference between cloud management and local management is currently, to this point, rogue AP detection is only available using a local controller. If you are using the Nebula Cloud, you don't get rogue AP detection. So if that's a feature you need to use the local controller. And we've just got here sort of a breakdown showing you with each of the different models of security firewall, how many APs can be basically managed out of the box. As you see, almost all of them use 8 APs. And in the case of the VPN 50, it is 4. Hold on just a second. And then you can see here with licenses how many different APs you can expand that up to. And that, guys, that is the end of today's overview. I know it's sort of dragged on here almost an hour. I appreciate you for sticking around. If you've got some questions, send those in now. I don't have any right now waiting for me. While we wait to see if any questions come in, just want to let you guys know most of our webinars are recorded and then uploaded to our YouTube channel. So there's a lot of different Zyxel companies because we're international. So those of that we are doing here in the US, those are uploaded to Zyxel America channel on YouTube. So that's most of our webinars. It's also video case studies, best practice videos, things like that. So go check that out. And then if you wanted to connect to us on LinkedIn, we are a Zyxel US channel. We also do have a user forum for talking to other Zyxel users and installers. That is found at forum.zyxel.com. One of the cool things about this forum is it is monitored by our R&D and product management teams. So they will occasionally answer questions that you post on there. It's not solely user to user. And even when they don't, they're often taking notes and trying to see which areas people are having issues with for improvement plans, feature requests, things like that. It's also one of the best resources for release notes, security advisories, things like that. That's one of the easiest places to find the latest information that's come out there for you. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you did have something, you can email me directly, seanr@zyxel.com. Sean is spelled S-H-A-W-N, and then the letter R there, or you just reach out to your salesperson and they can loop in whoever they need to get that question answered for you. Thanks for joining us today. I hope to see you at one of our other webinars. We do webinars generally on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Generally, Tuesdays are more techie and in-depth, and Thursdays are more high-level salesy type presentations. Thank you.